At long last, we've been given John Green's brilliant novel adaptation, Looking for Alaska, created and show-ran by the OC creator Josh Schwartz. I've seen the first 2 episodes, they're both incredible, and we're going over episode 1 today here on AfterBuzz TV.
I'm Maria Menounos, and you're tuned in to AfterBuzz TV, the ESPN of TV talk. Now, let the buzz begin.
Alrighty, here we are for the Looking for Alaska after show here on AfterBuzz TV. Thank you so much for tuning in. Quickly, if this is your guys' first time on the network, we are your go-to TV coverage network, AfterBuzz TV. We're the ESPN of TV talk, and we cover just about everything that's airing on television. And of course, right now we're covering Looking for Alaska, the incredible John Green book that has now become a film. Let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Jeff Graham. I'm so excited to be here. I'm a huge John Green fan. Looking for Alaska was actually the first John Green novel I've read, and since then I've read a ton of his books. I think aside from An Abundance of Catherines, which I've heard is great and I've not read, but I will. But either way, I'm in love with this book. You know, it's one of those books, I'm sure you can relate, that you sit down, you open page 1 of Looking for Alaska, and before you know it, you've finished the book. It's one of those books that kind of starts out on one thing, it's this coming of age story, and all of a sudden it becomes a meditation on life itself and what kind of life is worth living and the philosophy of life and death. And it's just, I'd say, a really, really important book overall, and especially a really important book for me. So that's a little bit about me and my obsession with Looking for Alaska. In terms of the team around this show, I'm a big Josh Schwartz fan. I think the OC is a pretty elegantly made teen show. And yeah, just a lot of reasons to be excited for this show, and I want to thank you for tuning in. On today's show, I will be covering the pilot. For those of you who have read the book, I'm going to do a little bit of book versus show comparisons. I'll go over the characters, what I thought of the show overall, and even a special segment where I go over some of the music that I particularly love, because in this adaptation, the music plays such an important part of the show. Okay. My overall thoughts on the pilot, I thought it was wonderful. I think they really nailed Miles. John Green can kind of create these, a lot of times his protagonists can be a little ambiguously drawn, I think for a reason. They're sort of like the teenage everyman. I think that in looking in The Fault in Our Stars, we kind of see that with the male protagonist in that book. They can be sort of these ambiguously drawn sort of everyman characters. And I think in that way, sometimes casting John Green protagonists can be hard, but Miles is particularly wonderful in this show. Let me quickly pull up my notes. He is played by, pardon the delay, guys. I have a lot of notes here because I'm conscientious about good coverage. He is played, I'm still looking for it. Sorry, y'all, tons of notes. Here we go. You know what, I know I have it somewhere. Here we go, sorry for the delay. Miles is played by Charlie Plummer, and he's wonderful in the show. They call him, of course, Pudge in the show, and I think they cast the perfect body type for this because in both the book and the TV show, Pudge is listed as being notably skinny. So from the very start, we see him, and I thought the way that they drew his hometown, the way that we see his interactions with his family, were really accurate. And again, it's not just the performance, but it's the production design and the period design that really immerse us in 2004. It's interesting as a viewer of this because it's kind of the first time I've seen 2000s nostalgia so perfectly rendered on TV. You know, a show like Freaks and Geeks really captures the 90s, but to so distinctly capture an era like 2005, first of all, is beautifully done, and second of all, makes me feel kind of old, so I'll be curious to hear what you think about that. By the time they get to Culver, I love the way Culver looks. It's sort of that quintessential boarding school look, beautifully shot. I think the way they characterize the weekend warriors versus, you know, Pudge and Miles's crew is really well made. And let's talk about the Colonel, because I love this portrayal. Again, let's see if I can do better with my character notes this time. The Colonel is portrayed, here we go, searching and looking. Sorry guys, so many notes, should have been a bit more organized. You know, I'll go over characters at the end, but I really loved the way this performance was executed. I think the Colonel, both in the book and the TV show, is portrayed as kind of prickly, kind of imperfect, and particularly his relationship was drawn in a very funny but realistic way. So I love the Colonel here. And finally, we have to talk about Alaska, because this is a really, really difficult casting. And Alaska, I thought here was also beautifully drawn. You know, I think with a character like Alaska, you run the risk of sort of casting a manic pixie dream girl and not getting exactly the performance you want or need, but I thought this performance was wonderful, and I'm just really in love with all of these characters. Alaska is played by Christine Forsyth, which I really appreciate. And sorry, I finally found the character name. The Colonel is played by Denny Love, and I'm loving all these performances. So Christine Forsyth and Denny Love, respectively, play Alaska and the Colonel, and they're just wonderful. Even, Tabuki is not as prominently featured in either the book or the show, but Jay Lee is doing a nice job with this, and I'm anticipating we'll see more and more of him as the show goes on. Rather than cover the whole show, I'm going to go over two specific scenes that I thought really resonated in this pilot. One was first when they actually show the kind of incident of getting caught on campus and getting expelled. This was a really interestingly drawn scene. I thought it really gave us a good look at who the Weekend Warriors were, and the show wasn't afraid to sort of really dig into what, this first time encounter would look like, how embarrassing and mortifying it would actually be to get caught in this situation. So the incident that actually starts the feud when the couple gets caught was really, really beautifully drawn. And I want to talk about when Miles/Pudge gets thrown into the lake. I was on the edge of my seat. This was kind of a nail-biting scene, and I was kind of worried. I've read the book, and I was still worried that Pudge might not make it out of the lake. So this was intense, and it really shows how kind of aggressive and terrifying the Weekend Warriors are, and really sets the stage for the feud that we know is inevitably coming and is so beautifully covered in episode 2, pardon me. In terms of other things that really stood out, I love the fact that a lot of the dialogue is pulled directly from the book. I think John Green dialogue can be tricky. As we know, John Green is sort of like today's John Hughes. He really is able to capture the coming-of-age adolescent experience, but I also think he's a great writer, but can write sort of challenging, heightened dialogue, sort of quirky, almost Aaron Sorkin-esque dialogue, but for teenagers. I think that can be really hard to act and perform because it is a bit stylized and a bit elevated. And I think in the wrong hands, that type of dialogue can read as false or can pull you out of the world that you're in. But I think the dialogue actually really worked. And it's sort of these precocious, brilliant young teens that John Green loves to write really, really pulled it off. All three of these lead performances are wonderful. And I'm just excited to see more of this rich dialogue, more of these comedic performances. And the degree of difficulty in pulling out performances like this can be challenging. So I want to applaud the actors and the dialogue, which could have quickly gone to something feeling kind of fake or artificial. Okay, that's my overall thoughts on the pilot. I'm really excited to see where things go, and you can make sure you keep tuning into this show where I can give you updates. I'm gonna go over my special segment real quick, where each week I'm gonna go over one of the songs that was featured, and I'm about the right age, so I'll talk about what those songs meant to me. But my favorite music cue of this episode, despite the fact that I loved almost every music cue, was the Postal Service's "The District Sleeps Alone Tonight." I was a huge fan of the Postal Service when I was exactly Miles's age. Basically, Ben Gibbard and Death Cab for Cutie in general are a pretty important part of the development of my tastes in music. And so when that sound drop hits, it just felt so perfect. Again, it's amazing that this show is managing to capture nostalgia around the era of the aughts, the 2000s, and bands like the Postal Service just so accurately and astutely capture this moment, this point in time, and sort of the psychology and probably artistically indie stylings of these particular teens. So beautifully executed. It shows that Josh Schwartz knows exactly what he's doing with this show, and I will be going over more amazing music cues throughout the show. For now, that's all I've got on the pilot, guys. That was my coverage of the pilot of Looking for Alaska. Make sure you let me know what you thought of the pilot down below. I'm going to continue doling out these episodes as I watch them, but so far, this is a really wonderful show. I think Hulu is really nailing it, and I just can't wait to see what's next. Until next time, guys, my name is Jeff Graham. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time here on the Looking for Alaska After Show.
Our founder, Keven Undergaro, and me, Maria Menounos, would like to thank you for tuning in to AfterBuzz TV. Remember, we're not just the first, we're the biggest in the world, and we're the only destination for all your favorite TV shows. Whatever you crave, we've got it. So go to AfterBuzzTV.com and check out our lineup. Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.